Hello and welcome to my show, The Thriving Woman. I am your host, Carmel Austin.
I can't believe I'm counting down the minutes till it's Tuesday. Another day back home.
I will be sharing keys to help you form healthy hearts and boundaries. I'll see you in the show. Hello. Here we are again. This is another amazing episode of The Thriving Woman. I tell you folks, it's been a little while. Life has been super busy. I have been building my new website, sharing about our books. I can see that my lovely friend Shonarobyn has got two of our books there sitting behind her in our series Journey to Wholeness. And coming up as well, we have the third edition of that will be coming out next year, Brave New Chapters. But, you know, that's something that we're all on a journey with. But today I have my lovely friend Shonarobyn with me. But I'll introduce myself to you again. I am Carmel Austin. I am the founder of Carmel's Garden. I am a 4 times international best-selling author, to the grace of God. And I've established through Carmel's Garden my business, Carmel Austin Publishing. So a little bit about myself. As a little girl, I love art. I love creating. I love designing. And I would get on the school bus, and that would come to our school, the library bus, sorry. And I'd get up there and look at all these books and all these pictures and all these colours, and I would dream about writing my story. And here I am now in my 60s. I just turned 60 this year. And I've had the privilege over the last 3 years, to write my story in 4 books. And at the moment too, I'm working on my kids' book, Adventure Cove, which I wrote many years ago, and that is set in Jervis Bay, which is a local beach area where I live here in Australia. And all my dreams are coming true because I've been working really, really hard. And here we are today with the Thriving Woman podcast show. And we're on this journey where Shonarobyn and I have met more than 30 years ago in my local church that I still attend. And she courageously said yes to sharing her story on the Thriving Woman podcast show. Then she joined me and shared her story in our book, Courageous Voices Unlocked. And then we're going to be journeying together as well, which is an absolute privilege, and writing her story. So today we'll be talking a little bit about that, but we're in season 4 now, and we're talking about empowering stories. So welcome, Shona, again to another episode of The Thriving Woman.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. That's awesome. It has been an exciting year, hasn't it? It's going too quickly.
Absolutely.
Going too quickly. And thank you for this opportunity. And I settled very quickly. I saw that you were asking for empowering stories. And earlier this year, I've been following Dr. Gabor Mate for a number of years now. But earlier this year, with an interview, he was a renowned a physician, and a specialist in addictions, trauma, and child development. He was born in Hungary at the time of the horrendous invasion by the Nazi Germans as the Holocaust in Hungary came about. And he tells us that his mother, at 10 months old, to save his life, his mother handed him over to a Christian woman in the street and said, "Save my son." And that woman took that child and saved him. And his mother and father and sister survived that Holocaust, and they ended up in Canada. So he's Hungarian Canadian, and that's where he became a physician slash GP. But he specialized in the addictions area and found that that's where his heart lay. I love this man and his teaching and his experience. So he has a definition for addictions that, and I love it because he says very clearly, the medical profession have got it wrong. Their definition of addiction only applies to substance abuse and habits and genetics and disease. And he has an entirely different approach. And Carmel, I'm going to read it because it actually inspires me to understand how prevalent addictions are within us and those around us. And of course, as a community nurse, I have this generation of older people, and the phenomenon is their obsessive independence, their steely independence,
Yes.
shutting out services, alienating family. And it's always been, what is this? What are we dealing with? And if you're a family member trying to deal with an obsessively steely, independent older person, it's gut-wrenching because they seem selfish and not open to change or learning. Anyway, let me give you the definition because it's truly, and it inspired me all year. Addiction is any behavior in which a person finds temporary relief or pleasure and therefore craves that behavior. They suffer negative consequences as a result of that behavior and yet have difficulty giving it up. Addiction is any behavior in which a person finds temporary relief or pleasure and therefore craves the behavior and suffers negative consequences as a result of that behavior, and yet they struggle to give it up. And when I looked, because I'm working still, and I have these obsessively independent clients, and there's no dementia diagnosis. Makes sense if they've got dementia to have all this resistance and impulsiveness and whatnot, but there's no dementia behavior. And it's addiction. And we're dealing with broken hearts, old broken hearts, because addiction is all about the hidden, lost, buried story, the trauma from all those years ago. And so, I know from, I recognized with my clients in the community that they're impulsive, impatient, resistive to learning, not open to receiving instruction. And it was like, really, guys? But it's an addiction. And it changes how you might deal with them or connect with them with that understanding. And it's true. And they have the key to it. You are dealing with an addiction when you realize and recognize they have no insight and no awareness that they are the problem. It's always you or outside them, but it's never them. And the behaviors continue. So my realization with looking at, and I have to put my hand up for this, but I'll come to that in a moment. I realized that it also gave me an absolute amazing and wonderful insight into my own adoptive mother. And I've always wanted to understand her isolated behavior, her steely determination. And I understood, I pieced it together, her story, the trauma of being a war nurse, the trauma and grief of infertility grief, not being able to have her own children, the hysterectomy at 33. I understood that. But Gabor's definition of addiction just gave me a gift when I realized that her addiction to renovating and selling houses was an addiction. And so my dad was in the bank and he was a troubleshooter. So a little bit like being in the military, we moved a lot. We moved every 18 months to 2 years to different towns. What was there? 8 towns, I think 8 houses, 7 schools. And Mum always did the packing up and the unpacking and organizing our room. It was always how she wanted it. And the final 2 bank manager roles for my father, the bank manager's residence was old and decrepit. And so in those years nearing his retirement, the final 2 postings, he and Mum were responsible for the 2 new houses. Then they retired in 1977. He passed in 1993, but Mum lived for 28 years more till 2015, and she renovated 14 houses. Now, I know just by saying that that's got to be an addiction. But the pattern was always the same. And I took advantage of understanding one of the communication models that I absolutely love is a very simple one: above the line, below the line. And above the line, it's the ROW. So when it comes to your words and your feelings and your thoughts, you are responsible. You take ownership. And it's a win-win situation. So you grab that oar and you're in charge. You're in charge. And, when you embrace your life, your words, your thoughts, feelings like that, you grab that oar and you're in charge. But the people who live below the line, I love it because they're in bed. So BED, blame, excuses, and denial. And so Mum's pattern was always, she didn't like the neighbors, there was something wrong with the church, she didn't like the bowling club. So there was always a reason to move on. And of course, she was nurturing. I'm sure that renovating those houses with all that color schemes, painting, choosing whatever it was she was doing in the way of renovating. And she did and it was external. It was the gardens and the lawns. She had green fingers, whatever she planted. But I never, ever got to share a renovation with her. I never looked at a color scheme, looked at paint patterns, woodwork, nothing. Mum did that alone. And the key to that this is an addiction to the core of your being. And at 93, only died in June. So about 5 months before she passed, she actually tried to do one more house. And she got out of the house searching. She was already 93. She died at 93 in 5 months. And she found a house and she shifted the money. And I got word I'm living in Australia and Mum's on the move again. And the solicitor and the real estate guy visited her and gently talked our 93-year-old out of one more renovation, that she was better off where she was. God bless those people. So I know that, to me, especially as I'm settling into my own place now, and the wonderful feeling to be building it around me and what I love. And I've got pictures of all my families. I've got multiple grandmothers because of my adoption background, and all their photos are going up. Maori, Irish Catholic, Presbyterian, my favorite grandmothers, the grandmothers I never met, they are going on display. And I'm just loving that. So coming back to, this is, my understanding, what it gave me to understand my mother like that and know that that's as close to healing her broken heart as you could get, to be in those houses. And there would have been perfectionism, but she didn't have anyone getting in the way, so she could do that and be that. And I just love that she found a way to deal with her pain and to live with it, even though on the outside it looked, she was alone and there was huge sadness. And I get that. I wish I'd got to share that. Obviously, I do. But she found a way. And not everyone finds a way to live as fully as she did in those years. So widowed from 1993 to 2015, that's a long time in widowhood
It's a
and being
very long
alone.
time. And Shona, as you're speaking to, I think about your life and what you're been through, and I know you've touched on it in the past of how your mother was and how it reflected on you. And yes, you've been in your new home now for 6 months, and that was a door that God opened for you, and not feeling like a little bit like a vagabond where you're going from place to place and living with family and all of those things. So how do you feel, Shona, how it's like what went through with what your mum went through and how you are working through things in your own life now, so that at your age, God's bringing that healing in your life?
I think the always you're looking for the insight, because of insight and awareness. And so we were raised to be alone. So, and my mother's behavior there with that aloneness, and has been very much, that's one of my major insights, is that we were very isolated and alone growing up. We kept changing schools, we kept changing houses, we kept changing neighborhood. And I know that God, my quote here, Psalm 34:18, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. And I know that he was with my mother, and I know that he has been with me through all of this. Now, I loved being the gypsy. This is the first time in my life. It's no good jumping up and down and going, oh no, that was a tough life. I loved being a gypsy. I still love getting in the car, going places. I still love my dream and goal of going back to Spain and walking across it and being in a different dormitory and accommodation every night. And for some people, that would be unbearable. And I love it to the core of my being. So the hand of God has always been covering me in that. And then I've made this transition where I've got my own place and I'm creating my own space. And obviously it's the presence of God that's doing that to its core. And so let me just take a moment on having a shared chuckle here about obsessive independence. So I on Saturday was in IKEA shops. And I'm 76, and no, I'm not as strong as I used to do, and I can't heave things around like I used to. And I couldn't find the corner bookshelf that I wanted, but I found this double box unit with 8 boxes for my display cabinet for all these photos that I want to put up. And it weighed a ton. And I wanted it home, and I wanted it home now. So I found a gentleman, a staff member, and he lifted it off the pile because I couldn't even move it, and it went on the trolley. And then I took it out, and then I ended up at Click and Collect because they kept saying, go to Click and Collect. But the only way you can get the staff to come out to you is you have to have a phone, Click and Collect, and a code. So I couldn't, there was no staff. And a lady parked behind me, beautiful moment. And she came and she said, I'll help you with that if you'll let me have the trolley because I've got stuff to take in. And I went, right. She was young and she was strong. We lifted it together, 1, 2, 3. I put the back of the seats down and we pushed it in together and it didn't quite fit. And she went in and pushed down the back seats and bang, in it was. Now, I was laughing all the time at myself going, Shonarobyn Eisenberg, this is obsessive independence if ever. Look at you. But God was gracious. He's always gracious to me but the real loaves to fishes moment was that I still had 20 minutes in IKEA to go through and finish. My phone was down to 5% power, dropped down to 2%. And I didn't know my way. It was dark. It was after 5 o'clock. And I did not know my way home from Concord to Abbotsford without the GPS. And so I'm praying, dear Lord, I have 2%. And that 2% got me home. Now that to me is loaves and fishes. That phone should have just gone bang. But in the dark and that way and left and right, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I got all the way home.
But
And the whole thing.
isn't it true that God wants us to come with a gracious heart with everything we're going through?
Yeah.
And that when we lean on him, he can do the miraculous. And
He does the miraculous.
And we just have to go, yeah, everything in life is not perfect. And,
Yep.
particularly folks with us recording, there's so many things happening in the world and we're called to pray and be at peace and read our Bibles and know that these things can happen. But I know for me, it's not engrossing myself in that, but getting on with what God has called me to. And, because for many years I put my life on hold and I didn't go after those things. And we age very quickly. Like we said, we're already halfway through 2025. And
time is sacred.
Yes.
Time is sacred.
Yes.
We are sacred. So my other quote for this, because the whole thing's just so precious to me, but it's Galatians, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fill the law of Christ. And I was so grateful to that lady and that she appeared at that moment. But the other one is the power, death and life is in the power of the tongue. And I want to take that to a different level, in that death and life is in the power of the thought, the power of the prayer. And when we take this learning that's now coming through magnificent research in trauma, our older generation did not have access to what we are receiving access to.
That's right.
That our thoughts and our energy and, we are all interconnected. When the world prays together, we are working together. We are in this together.
Yeah.
And the one thing our obsessive elderly do, and put my hand up, because I just think that Saturday story, I laughed, I'm still laughing. But we that's that catchphrase, I've got this. And it's possibly not a godly phrase. I've got this. And that thought, bring it back. Bring whatever is going on to the heart of God in every moment.
Yeah.
And I think our addictions, this is such a revolutionary view. You know, the human race took so long to understand germs. How horrendous was it all those years ago that people were dying, young babies, because they had no concept, and how life changed when they finally, and they resisted it when it was first brought in. That is a reality. And so how long has it taken to understand that trauma, that addictions there's always a story. There's always a broken heart.
Yeah.
And in the case of my clients and my parents, they were old, broken hearts. And I will do whatever I can to bring the presence of Christ and the love and the compassion and the patience that's needed to bring them into the present, because that's all you can offer them is your presence and God's presence in that moment. And it's my thinking. I can either see them as stubborn, resistive, resentful, or I can see them as hurting,
Human
broken.
beings who are broken and haven't been taught the life skills of
Yeah,
how to
that's
work
it.
with things
Exactly.
and
That's
and
it.
and I don't think they understood that they could give themselves that time, as
No.
particularly women, you know, with that matriarchal on them. Like, you know, I've come from an Italian Lebanese background, and women were there for their families. They were there to work, they were there to serve. And I know with my mum, she never really got time to work on anything. And then, you know, she had a tragic thing happen where she had to go into a nursing home and not have those closures. So, you know, I'm
Or
great.
being enabling them to live with it
Yes.
differently and
Yeah.
acknowledge it,
Yeah.
because grief
Yeah.
and trauma belong above the line because they're real.
Yeah.
It's not a case of whatever. Grief is raw and shocking, and their lives were full of it. And then trauma is unexpressed, unresolved grief, not finding the pathway through it. And it's not a case of, I hate that expression, closure, actually, because there isn't. You learn to live with it differently. You learn to embrace it. You learn to acknowledge it. You learn that that's a very real. My adopted background, of course, I'm not going to deny the grief and the pain of that start in life. And God bless Dr. Gabor for his insights into that, because it really is acknowledging yourself and acknowledging others. You can do much more. You can be more supportive. You can be more caring. You can be more compassionate when you understand that your grief is real and it's going to be with you for life, with whatever the cause is. But embrace it, acknowledge it.
One thing
And
I'd like to acknowledge about that older generation as well, but too, well, particularly what my mum taught me, that even though you go through those pains, there's joy in your life as well.
yep,
And
yep,
God enables you and blesses you, and you can look at those things through His grace. So, you know, we know there's always going to be trauma, and some people go through different lots of trauma. Yours was adoption, and like with your mother, loss because she wasn't able to have her own children, which I totally understand that because, I had
Yep.
fertility problems and lost my babies and they haven't grown up here on this earth. So, yeah, there are times where that happens to you, but I'm so grateful to the Lord for that we can take these things to the cross, to his feet, and that he can be honored through them and we can help others on the journey. So today, folks, as we're just been chatting and Shona's been really sharing her heart cry about as we age, we are privileged that we are, for us women, we're sharing our stories, we're writing our stories, we're talking about our stories. Not only they are, our prayer is that they help you, but they're helping us. They're helping us process. They're helping us understand what our parents went through, what our grandparents went through.
Yes.
And they're helping, when you think about the bigger picture about what's happening in the world. My parents were born into where there was poverty and the depression and all of those things happening in the world. And here we are, coming into nearly 100 years later, and it's still happening everywhere in the world. So I suppose for me, I'm just grateful for these open conversations that we're having and we're sharing about. So just as we're wrapping up, Shona, just a few more minutes, just finishing off your heart of what you have learnt and where you are today so that we can say, come and join us next time, folks. But for now, just finish off just for a couple of minutes, Shona, on what you have learnt through this process this year.
I have learned that God is very gracious to me. And, my daily prayer is for him and I to share the day, to share the thoughts, that whatever it is I'm reflecting on, it's in his presence. Whatever it is I'm working on, it's in his presence. And the joy of insight and awareness on what's been challenging professional situations, challenging personal situations. And when you get models like both this, the addiction model and definition from Dr. Gabor Mate, and the above the line, below the line, in all its simplicity and how it makes sense, and the Bible just supports, which is why death and life are in the power of the tongue. Because what comes from the mouth and the tongue is from your thoughts. And truly, when we bring God into those moments, it's not just moment, it's moment by moment. And I would have to say that my heart is very full. My cup of gratitude is overflowing with what I am learning. So my love of life, my reason for living is freedom, being of service, and lifelong learning. So if God is gracious enough to grant me those, there's my purpose in life.
Amen.
Amen.
Well, folks, as you can see, every time I talk to Shona, we just go at such a deep level, and she's honest and she's excited and she's exploring and she's taking on board all the things about her family, her heritage, her story, her life. And I'm excited to say that, we will be back again with another episode where Shona and I will be talking about these real things that happen in our lives. But today, thank you, Shona, for joining me on another episode of The Thriving Woman. And I'm thrilled that we have joined with you in your new home, and that, I personally have seen such growth in your life, and it's just such an honor where God has joined our hearts together again in this stage of our lives where we're walking this journey towards wholeness and health. So thank you again, everyone, and thank you, Shona, for joining me. And I will say to you all, thank you all for joining me in this episode of The Thriving Woman, and I will see you again. God bless for now.